This is Scandalous Freedom, Part 3. We've been making our way through the book of Galatians, and we're going to try to hit the high points of Galatians over the next handful of weeks. We're clearly not going to be able to go through each and every verse, but you'll get a sense of what the whole book is about by the time we're finished. And this is Part 3, but I want to do something a little different this week. I thought about this yesterday. This was kind of an audible that I called yesterday. That rather than moving on to the next part in Galatians, I kind of want to hit the rewind button and expand on a couple of things that I said last week for a good reason. I'll explain in a minute. But in order to set that up, I want to read Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. And when I read the verse, if you were here last week, then you'll understand maybe where I'm going with this. But Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, a famous verse, a well-known verse. Then Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." We're going to look at how that verse, in my opinion, has been misunderstood for a long time. Does what Jesus say there get in the way of our freedom? Does it reduce it, or does it induce it? So I was at a ministry Rob Zombie, Alice Cooper concert on Sunday night with my friend Ken at the I Think Amphitheater in West Palm Beach. And I posted something about that this past week, and people thought that what I was talking about was that Rob Zombie and Alice Cooper have gone into ministry together. And let me assure you that the band Ministry, who I have followed almost my whole life, has nothing to do with Christian ministry as you're thinking about it. I can assure you that. But I was at a concert last Sunday night with Ken. And at one point during one of the band's set, I pulled out my phone and started taking notes. Not about the concert, that was neither here nor there, but we were sitting on the lawn and I kept thinking about some of the things that I had said earlier that day in the message. And I wanted to expand on it for my own sake. I was thinking about it. I was wrestling with it, to be honest with you. And I wanted to expand on it for my own sake. This may come as a surprise to you, but I have to wrestle with this stuff too. I know it seems like I stand up here week after week and I'm sure of what I'm saying, and I do believe that what I'm saying each and every week is true, but it doesn't mean I don't wrestle with it. It doesn't mean that I don't have questions myself. I don't just have to work through other people's questions. I have to also work through my questions. When I think about what I'm going to say on Sunday morning, I'm not just working through what I anticipate your doubts will be, but I'm also working through my own doubts. And so I'm continually praying, God, I believe, but help my unbelief, constantly. And this was happening. This was the dynamic that was happening on Sunday night at this Rob Zombie concert. So as I was sitting there last Sunday listening, this is what I was wrestling with, okay? Last week, I said, when you know that God loves you unconditionally, you become increasingly free from needing everybody else to like you. Thank God that is true. So true and so liberating. And I also said that believing that, knowing that, makes you dangerous in all the right ways. It makes you bold. You become increasingly free from calculation. It makes you more spontaneous. It makes you less defended. In other words, it makes you more free. When you know, when you believe, when you trust that God loves you unconditionally, and that there's nothing you can do or fail to do that would make God love you less or more, it emboldens you. It makes you free from needing everybody else to like you, which gives you the ability and the courage to tell the truth about yourself and other things. Poet Sharon Olds, my friend John Blaze, pointed this out yesterday in a social media post, but poet Sharon Olds once wrote, "Cautious writers who don't dare to write what they really want to for fear of reprisals are not what we need." And I love that because it doesn't just apply to writers, it applies to all of us. We need unafraid people. People who are willing to risk rejection and disapproval and misunderstanding because they know they're accepted by the only one that ultimately matters, namely God. We need, in other words, a pack of free people, liberated people. And as a result of believing this, you begin living, like I said last week, with a sanctified I don't care-ness. You start feeling freer to be exactly who God made you to be. Do what you need to do, say what you need to say, and pursue what you want to pursue without being overly concerned with what everybody else thinks. You start feeling the freedom to express yourself the way you want, to dance, to laugh, to cry, to vent, to like what you like, and to be okay with not being okay. So I said all of those things last week, and as I was sitting there wrestling with it, I thought, yeah, but isn't expressing yourself part of the problem today? I mean, I was looking at this motley crew of people expressing themselves, and I was thinking, now I just told everybody this morning that knowing that God loves you unconditionally so that you're not nearly as concerned about what everybody else thinks empowers you and gives you the freedom to express yourself, to really show who you are. And as I was sitting there looking around, I thought, yeah, but isn't expressing yourself part of the problem today? I mean, there are all sorts of people expressing themselves in ways that are destructive. So shouldn't we be championing self-restraint rather than self-expression? I mean, isn't that what we should be championing? I mean, that's a legit question. That's what I was wrestling with on Sunday night. Disagreeing to a degree with myself, which happens on a fairly regular basis. I mean, you don't have to look far in our culture or even in our own hearts to see that freedom of expression can quickly go off the rails and become destructive. We justify all sorts of things in this world, all sorts of selfishness in our lives by saying, I'm just expressing myself. I'm just being me. In fact, there may be no greater social faux pas in our current cultural climate than the denial of self-expression, okay? So I understand the objection. I get it. But, and here's what I wrote down at the concert in my notes on my phone. There is a difference between expressing yourself to get approval and expressing yourself because you know you're already approved. Huge difference between those two things. A lot of so-called self-expression we see these days is people expressing themselves because they want acceptance in a particular tribe or by a particular group of people. They determine their moves and their look and their likes and their words, all in order to fit in, to find acceptance. That's what's driving their self-expression. They quickly discern what's allowed and what's not allowed, what's liked and what's not liked, and then they make their decisions accordingly. So what might appear at first to be self-expression is just a desperate attempt to find love and acceptance and approval. But that's not who they really are. Many of those same people don't feel the freedom to express their fears or their insecurities or their struggles or their secrets. Consciously or unconsciously, their expression is calculated, all in an attempt to find approval. So they're not, in their attempts to get approval by expressing themselves, they're not really expressing themselves. They're not really showing you who they really are. They're showing you who they want you to believe they are so that you'll love them, so that you'll accept them. And we're all guilty of this to some degree. But the truest form of self-expression is when you feel the freedom to be who you actually are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because you know you're already approved. When you live your life from approval and not for it, that's when the real you comes out. That's what I was talking about last week. That's when the real you comes out. The one that God made, the one that God loves, the one who is unafraid to be exactly who you are, the one who dares to put the real you out there. So there's a huge difference between living your life or expressing yourself in order to get acceptance and expressing yourself because you know you're already accepted. When you express who you are, when you tell the truth about yourself, when you put yourself out there because you know you're already accepted by the only one that matters, namely God, the real you comes out. All of you comes out. Jenna, my daughter, and I were having a conversation about this the other day. And she was saying how being around certain people makes her feel like she can't totally be herself, either because they may not like it or they may not understand it or reciprocate it. It was a good, rich, deep conversation about these things. And I reminded her that no one outside of her has the power to rob her of her freedom. No one. She may be afraid to be herself because of how it might be received, but that's an inside of you problem, not an outside of you problem. It's not the other person that's keeping you from being you. It's your fear of the other person that's keeping you from being you. But as I said last week, the deepest freedom happens when the affirmation you look for from others is replaced by the affirmation you already have from God. That's what makes you bold, courageous. That's what gives you the freedom to truly express yourself. Because we have God's approval, we have nothing to prove or protect. You don't need everyone to love you or understand you or be just like you. You can endure being misunderstood and rejected by others because you'll never be misunderstood and rejected by God. See, real slavery is living your life trying to gain favor, which is a life driven by fear. But real freedom is living your life knowing you already have favor, which is a life driven by faith. See, fear and slavery go hand in hand. Where there is one, there will always be the other. But on the flip side of that, faith and freedom always go hand in hand. Where you find one, you always find the other. In fact, faith fuels freedom, fuels it. Faith in the truth that you are loved no matter what, that you are in a relationship with an unlosable lover who really likes all of you. Well, that relaxes you to be yourself when you know that to be true. That's faith, God-given faith, believing, knowing, trusting that you are in forever with God, that you're loved by God, that you're accepted and approved by God. And when you know that to be true, it relaxes you. You're less defended, you're less calculated, you don't pretend to be someone you're not as much as you used to. And this also gives you the freedom to accept people for who they are, which is an ongoing challenge for all of us. What is it that really prevents us from accepting people for who they really are? What is it? What's the blockage? What gets in the way? You see, the thing that prevents me from accepting you as you are is some belief inside that I need you to be more like me if I'm going to be happy and feel safe and secure and known, okay? It's true. You can laugh at me all you want. It's true for you too. But it's true that there is something I need, something missing in me that requires you to be a certain way. I mean, marriages end all the time because of this stuff. I need you to become a certain way. I need you to do certain things. I need you to like certain things if I'm going to be happy. And in that sense, I need you to give me the security that I'm looking for. I need you to think like me, feel like me, approach life like me, like the things that I like, be passionate about the things that I'm passionate about, and so on and so forth. But if I'm free from needing you to be like me in order for me to be okay, then I can let you be you. If I know that because of God's love and forgiveness and mercy and grace and approval, I'm okay, I'm already safe, I'm already secure, I already have everything I need, well, now I don't need you to change to become more like me if I'm going to be happy. Because when I take that sort of a posture, it's basically telling the other person, you're not free to be you. I want you to be like me. I'm not going to give you the freedom to be you. Well, if you've been in a relationship for more than 24 hours with somebody, okay, you know this to be true. Parents are like this with their kids. Husbands are like this with their wives. Wives are like this with their husbands. Boyfriends and girlfriends are like this with the other. I mean, this is an ongoing. Employers and employees. I mean, this is something we have to deal with each and every day. But remember, it's God's job to change people. It's our job to simply love them. And when we know that all of the love we need and crave we already have, now I'm free to love you without needing you to change. I'm free to love you and let you be you, regardless of whether or not you change. But that can only happen through people who know they are free from the need to make someone like us, and free to let them be themselves. So I'm not only free to be me, I'm also free to let you be you. Okay, so I'm working through all this stuff at this Rob Zombie concert, okay, all this stuff. I mean, I was partly high because all the marijuana smoke. I mean, I got super great insight. I'm like, I should do this more often. I'm just kidding. But this is what I was working through. Okay, last Sunday night, sitting on the lawn at I Think Amphitheater. And I was able to work through these thoughts and questions. But as the week went on and the sermon got posted, I got more questions from people. Not derogatory ones, not anything that was, sort of abrasive, but just questions. Questions from people who themselves were wrestling with it. Questions that needed some clarification. And one woman commented after listening to the message and said, "But doesn't the Bible say, deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me?" I mean, how does that play into all this? And I responded and said, it does. I just read the verse a few minutes ago. Jesus says in Matthew 16:24, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." So doesn't that fly in the face of freedom and self-expression? I mean, isn't that a call for something other than freedom? Isn't that a requirement to be restrained rather than expressive? No. In fact, it encourages and fuels freedom. This is a verse, as I said a while ago, that has been so terribly misunderstood, in my opinion, and terribly taught, in my opinion, over the years, that it has us thinking something about it that's not actually true once you look at the verse more carefully. What is the self that Jesus is saying needs to be denied? That's the first question. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself. Well, what is this self that he's calling us to deny? I mean, we automatically think he's talking about behavior. I mean, maybe the monastics had it right in denying themselves daily comforts like soft beds and good food and sound sleep and leisure and sexual pleasure and marriage and all those things. Maybe they had it right. Maybe we should just all go to a convent or a monastery somewhere and deny ourselves the pleasures of life. Maybe that's what Jesus is talking about. Is Jesus saying that we need to suppress all pleasure and desire and joy and comfort? Is he saying you need to suppress all that is you? That you shouldn't enjoy sports and dancing and good food and good laughs and great house music? Is that what he's saying? That you should only listen to Christian music and go to Christian movies and read Christian books and attend Christian concerts and have only Christian friends and try your best not to enjoy yourself too much when you're not in church, okay? I mean, is that what he's saying? There are a lot of people who think that is what he's saying. I have a friend who runs a nonprofit. He's the executive director of a nonprofit, a ministry, a teaching ministry of someone very well known. Someone who, in many ways, I have the utmost respect for. But this person, who is the founder of this ministry, the teacher behind it all, is a very, very serious man, very serious. And he has spent his life denying himself. I mean, he's married and has 5 kids, but has spent his life denying himself some of these everyday pleasures that we enjoy. And he was going through a particularly rough time in his life. And my friend, who directs his ministry, said to a few other employees, why don't we take him to a movie? Just to sort of, take the load off, give him some leisure time. So they invited him. They got together with him and said, why don't we go see a movie? And so they went and they watched it. And they were all nervous, like, this guy doesn't go to movies. And he was very non-expressive during the entire movie. I don't know what movie they saw. I'm certain that it was relatively clean and wholesome, but there was like no expression. And at the end of the movie, they were walking out, and each of them were afraid to ask this guy, what did you think? And so they didn't, but he pulled his ticket stub out of his pocket and looked at it and said, that cost $8? And the guys were like, yeah. And he said, I wonder how far that $8 could have gone in service to the Lord. Okay. And these guys were just deflated. Like they were trying to do something nice for the guy, try to help him, comfort him, be his friend. But this man has come to believe that this verse is talking about the denial of anything and everything, failing to see that God, the God who invented, who created pleasure, is behind things like good food and good music and good acting and good laughs and good friendships. That God is the creator of joy and laughter and fun. So is this what Jesus is talking about? I mean, is he talking about that kind of radical denial of pleasure and desire and joy and comfort? Is that what he's talking about? Here was my answer to that lady. And I think it deserves a little bit of unpacking. But I want you to understand this verse so that you're not misled, so that you can enjoy life, enjoy it, and be free. Here's what I said to her. The self that needs to be denied is something different than what you might think. The self that needs to be denied, that Jesus is talking about in this verse, is the deeply embedded notion that we can somehow sacrifice enough or do enough or be good enough to get God's favor, to get him to bless us. The one thing we hate more than being told what to do is being told that there's nothing we can do, that it's out of our hands. We so badly want to believe that we can earn something, that we deserve something. That is the great denial that is needed and called for in this verse. Not don't go see a movie, or don't go out with your friends, or don't enjoy life. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about that deeply embedded notion in all of us that foolishly believes, that arrogantly believes that we can do something, we can sacrifice enough, do enough, be good enough to obligate God to bless us, to obligate God to love us, that will obligate God to like us. That notion is the self that needs to be denied. Okay, that is what Jesus is talking about here. Taking up the cross, and then Jesus goes on to explain even more in the next line. Taking up the cross means trusting that Jesus did all the right things required to secure our place in God's loving arms forever, and that there's nothing we can do or fail to do that will get God to love us more or less. That's what taking up the cross means. So, I went on to say, by all means, deny the self that is hell-bent on earning and take up the cross of Christ's finished work for you and rest. Enjoy life. Rest. Relax. The self that needs to be denied is this idea that we have to be good enough for God, that we have to do enough for God, that we have to sacrifice enough for God, as if he needed anything from us at all. Just, as you've heard me say 1,000 times, just enjoy the gift. Why do we spend our lives trying to pay God back for a gift he has freely given us? Why? I mean, I know that sounds pious, but it's the height of arrogance. And it robs us of freedom. It robs us of joy. So what is the self that Jesus is calling us to deny? It's that part of us that believes we can do things that will obligate God to bless us. That there's a ladder that we are capable of climbing that will get God to love us, that will get God to like us. And then taking up the cross, what does that look like? It means banking it all on Jesus. Banking it all on the fact that Jesus did all the good things and the nice things and the required things that we couldn't do for us. Putting all of our eggs in that basket. Trusting that we are loved forever, not because of what we've done, but because of what Jesus has done for us. And that induces freedom. That's why I said this verse doesn't reduce freedom, it induces it. It fuels it. Faith in that fact that Jesus has done for us what we could never do for ourselves, that grants us freedom. As Jenna and I were having our conversation the other day, I reminded her of something my friend said a while back, that the Christian life is really just a life of adjusting to our freedom. Freedom is not something that we have to go out and get, something that we have to go out and secure. It's something we already have. And our entire lives are spent adjusting to that, which are not always easy adjustments. Sometimes they're very painful because we've been clinging for so long to some sense of deservedness, some sense of ability and capacity to be able to get God and others to love us. And that's exhausting. So this idea that taking up the cross of Christ's finished work for you is what Jesus is talking about, and how that gives us rest, that is exactly what we celebrate when we take communion together. Exactly. That's why we do it around here like it's a celebration. It's not some somber experience. It's a celebration. We do it with joy because we're saying, thank God that this has all been taken care of for us. That it's a done deal, that regardless of what kind of week I had, what I did or failed to do, the arguments I had, the vengeance that I expressed, the anger and impatience, the lust, the pride, the greed, all of that stuff, all of that crap that we do every week in thought, word, and deed, by doing things we shouldn't do and not doing things we should do, all of that stuff, God doesn't hold it against us. And the reason God doesn't hold all of that stuff against us is because God held all of that stuff against Jesus at the cross. So when he said from the cross, "It is finished," he meant the sweatshop is closed. It's over. The days of working and performing and earning are done. The veil to the holiest of holies has been torn from top to bottom, and now we have free access into God's gracious presence forever.